Hey yo, what up gamers? It's Porcupine here, and I'm coming at you today, guys, with a little bit of a different video. I've been becoming a bit of a cinephile, or pedophile, or whatever they call those type of people. I've been getting into cinema, into cinema history, and I wanted to go back and watch, films from some of these acclaimed directors. I haven't seen a lot of classic films, and I decided I wanted to watch all of Stanley Kubrick's films. So today I'm going to be tier list ranking all of Kubrick's films in order. Let's get started. I think I have some unorthodox Stanley Kubrick takes here, so it's going to make for an interesting video. And starting off with Stanley Kubrick's first film, it is titled Fear and Desire. And this film hasn't really aged very well, I would say. You can kind of tell that Kubrick wasn't very experienced when he was making this. Kubrick was kind of embarrassed by this film and has since tried to delete all evidence that the film ever existed. He actually burned the tapes of the film to try to kind of erase this film from history, but it survived and you can watch it. There's two forms of the film. When it first premiered, it was about an hour, 10 minutes, and then he shortened it down to about an hour. That actually was the start of a trend for Kubrick that he did a lot, was releasing the film in a longer version and then kind of cutting it down to make it a superior film or whatever. It's kind of interesting because usually with director's cuts of films, they usually want to add much more stuff into the film. Whereas, with Kubrick, he kind of wants to edit the bloat out of the film. Nevertheless, this film, I didn't really enjoy it, honestly. The film is kind of an anti-war film, which is a theme that shows up in a lot of Kubrick's films, anti-war sentiments. The most interesting thing the film explores is one of the characters kind of losing their mind from what they're seeing. And there's a scene where they capture this woman, and then when this dude is left alone with this woman, he kind of goes crazy and loses his mind. But even with that storyline, I feel they went kind of over the top with it. I didn't really believe that this guy had lost his mind. It seems a little goofy the way it's portrayed in the film. The actor's almost doing a Joker performance if you watch the film.
First we're a bird, and then we're an island. Before I was a general, and now I'm a fish. Hurrah for the magicians!
The plot of the film centers around these soldiers who have kind of crash landed in enemy territory and have to escape. And then later they kind of plan an attack on the enemy. Yeah, the film just hasn't really aged very well. It's not very good. Probably one of Kubrick's worst films, which is why I'm going to give it a D tier. I'm not going to give it the full-on F tier because it's not a terrible movie or anything, but I don't think there's much substance to it. Now moving on to our next film by Kubrick, we got Killer's Kiss. This is a crime noir film, a popular genre back in these days. And this film definitely is a huge step up from Kubrick's previous film. The film centers around a kind of love story between this main character, who's a boxer, and this other character, Gloria. They fall in love together, but Gloria also has this jealous boss who doesn't want anyone to have her and doesn't want her to leave him. So that's kind of the conflict of the film. She finally tries to quit and collect her money from her boss, and it results in him taking her, and it leads to this climactic battle at the end. I enjoyed the film. I like the ending where the main character is kind of trying to escape and he's being chased down by this axe-wielding henchman. There's a quite funny sequence at the end when he's fighting this axeman in the middle of a mannequin shop or something. It was very, very strange, very funny. And the fight scene is just so goofy by today's standards. But yeah, I would rank it about a C tier film. It's enjoyable, but there's not much substance to it really. I'll rank Killer's Kiss as a C tier Kubrick film. Moving on to Kubrick's third film, we have The Killing. With this film, I think Kubrick really upped his game. The film is a heist film. It takes place at a horse racetrack where a lot of this sports betting, horse betting, stuff takes place, and they plan to steal all of the money from the betting. And in the film, you really see every step of this heist process, every person he hires, to do each specific task. And then it's really satisfying seeing it all kind of play out in the end. I also really like the character arc of the main character, who's kind of trapped in this marriage that's very emotionally abusive. She cheats on him and really doesn't care about him at all. And securing this money in this heist is his way of kind of proving himself to his wife. And you can see how he's really in a kind of rough spot in life. I thought it was a very good arc. It has a good payoff at the end. The film also cleverly uses some non-linear storytelling. We get to see the heist play out a few times from multiple people's perspectives, so you can really see how they were able to pull this thing off. That was a pretty well done film. I like the ending, and I would rank it as a B-tier Kubrick film. Now moving on to Kubrick's fourth film, we have Paths of Glory. This is where Kubrick really becomes a god-tier filmmaker, starts making some masterpieces. Paths of Glory is his next take on an anti-war film, and I think it's probably his most scathing kind of critique on war. The film shows how there's kind of incentives built into the structure of the military. They kind of disregard people's lives. There's this main general character, and you see how he kind of becomes corrupted by seeking the glory, wanting to go up in the ranks and get medals and things like this, that he goes through with this attack that is basically impossible, an attack that is almost certainly just going to lead to the death of all of these men. He tries to force the men to go through with this attack. He orders a mortar strike, on a line of his own men to try to get them to continue moving forward. And this is based on a real event that did occur in World War I with French soldiers. And then the film becomes kind of a courtroom drama as 3 of these soldiers are put on trial for cowardice for not going forward with the attack. And you see how this trial is kind of just a sham and is meant to make an example out of these soldiers. Even though almost every soldier didn't really go forward with the attack and retreated, they pick just 3 soldiers to put on trial, and they weren't really picked fairly. I think the film is really effective at making its point that it wants to make, and I thoroughly enjoyed the film. Kirk Douglas as the main character is great. His character is a colonel, but he's also a lawyer, so he represents these 3 soldiers. You can see him becoming very frustrated with how corrupt this system is, and eventually, in the end of the film, it kind of blows up.
I apologize, sir, for not telling you sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man. And you can go to hell before I apologize to you now or ever again.
The film is a goddamn masterpiece. I'm gonna give it a fucking S tier. Okay, moving on to our next film, we have Spartacus. And this is another film that Kubrick has kind of disowned, tried to distance himself from. And that's because in this film, he didn't have as much creative control as he does with most of his other films, as it was a work for hire. Kirk Douglas and his production studio hired Kubrick on after they had already fired the previous director. So it's not really as much Kubrick's vision as Kubrick's other films. That being said, I did still thoroughly enjoy the film. It's a epic fantasy tale about Spartacus, who was a slave and started a kind of slave uprising that turned into a whole big thing, this whole war. In researching the film, it was interesting to learn that the film has some historical and political significance to the real world. When the original book Spartacus came out, it was in the heat of the Cold War and the kind of Red Scare, McCarthyism era. The author of the novel, Howard Fast, was actually a communist, like part of the Communist Party, and because of that, he was called before the House Committee on Un-American Activities and questioned about his involvement in some sort of anti-fascist organization. And because he refused to name names of people, he was actually sent to prison, and that's when he wrote the book. And the writer of the actual film Spartacus had a very similar backstory as well. Dalton Trumbo, who wrote the screenplay, was also a communist and was taken before the House Committee of Un-American Activities and was also sent to prison, which led to him being blacklisted from Hollywood, and basically everything he wrote after that point had to be credited under a pen name. But for Spartacus, Kirk Douglas, who plays Spartacus, made a very big point about actually having Dalton Trumbo credited and ending the practice of blacklisting in Hollywood. So that kind of led to this film being branded as like a commie film, and people actually protested it. There were picket lines outside of theaters, President John F. Kennedy actually made a big deal of actually crossing a picket line to go see Spartacus in protest. So it did have a pretty kind of big impact at the time, which I think is pretty cool. And you can see a lot of the parallels in the film between the stuff going on in ancient Rome and the politics going on in current America, especially a scene towards the end where the Romans are kind of demanding that these people tell them where Spartacus is. And none of them cooperate. They all say, "I'm Spartacus."
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus. I'm Spartacus.
It kind of echoes a lot of the Red Scare politics at the time. Watching the film today, you may not even realize these kind of political undertones to the film, but it is kind of a clever satire on the politics at the time. But even putting aside the kind of political significance of the film, I think the film on its own is a great film. Just visually, the film looks kind of way ahead of its time. It's Kubrick's first color film, and it really looks quite beautiful. There's lots of like painted landscapes in the background that look very real. A lot of huge, wide shots of the landscapes and the battles, and very beautiful film. The film almost felt like a Game of Thrones episode where it's on such a grand scale and you're following the politics of every character. I was just very invested in the story and characters. I thought that the performance of both Spartacus and Crassus were excellent in the film, especially Crassus is a very compelling villain. I especially like the love story between Spartacus and Varinia, the main female character who was also enslaved. And there's a scene towards the end where she's kind of captured by Crassus after Spartacus is defeated, and he just doesn't understand how she can love Spartacus and not him. And you really see how kind of mentally deranged he is. I just thoroughly enjoyed the entire film. It's a banger. And the version of the film I watched is the 1991 restored version, which is actually different than the original version that was released in the 60s. There are actually a few scenes that were never released until this 1991 version, especially a very creepy scene where Crassus is revealed to be bisexual.
Do you eat oysters?
When I have them, master.
Do you eat snails?
No, master.
Do you consider the eating of oysters to be moral and the eating of snails to be immoral?
No, master.
Of course not.
I was watching that, I'm like, this would have blown people's minds in the 60s, wow. But they never got to saw it. It was only in this remastered version. And there were several other kind of violent scenes that were cut for being too violent or something. So the current version that people watch is actually not the original version, but nevertheless, I did enjoy it. And I'm actually going to give Spartacus the A tier. That's how much I enjoyed it. I think that's higher than most Kubrick fans would place it. But this is my list, and we're going to do things my way. Moving on to our next Kubrick film, we got Lolita, the infamous pedophile film. Yeah, Lolita, I got some mixed feelings on this one. One of the things that kind of immediately struck me watching the film is the choice to actually use an underage actor in this role, this kind of hyper-sexualized child role. I was kind of questioning the ethics of even making a film like this using a child actor. It kind of reminded me of a lot of the discourse around the film Cuties. Cuties was a Netflix movie that was kind of critiquing the sexualization of children on social media, but it was controversial because they actually did use real child actors to play these sexualized children.
This film does try to make you sexually aroused by 11-year-olds. And I'll say it's not bad at it.
I think a lot of the same discourse would apply to Lolita were it to come out today. Definitely a bit fucked up. The film definitely presents this 15-year-old actor as if she is supposed to be sexually attractive to the viewer. That's pretty clear if you watch the film.
Oh, you must see the garden before you go. You must. My flowers win prizes around here. They're the talk of the neighborhood. Voila! My yellow roses, my daughter. Darling, turn that down, please. I can offer you a comfortable home, a sunny garden, a congenial atmosphere, my cherry pies.
When would it be convenient for you to have me move in?
Right now. I mean, it would be silly for you to go to a hotel, monsieur.
That's my bags in the taxi. Yeah, very persuasive salesman, Mrs.
Thank
Bates.
you. What was the decisive factor? My garden?
The producer of the film has even said as much, that they intentionally cast this actor because they wanted the audience to basically like understand why the main character is sexually attracted to this girl. They didn't want it to be presented as some creepy, perverted attraction. And the actor Sue Leone has made comments about how this movie negatively impacted her life, which is unfortunate. And the version of Lolita that was actually released is a pretty heavily watered down version of what they wanted to do. Kubrick has said like, there was a lot of stuff that had to be cut because of the censorship. So I mean, there is a timeline where this could have been like a borderline child porn film. Yeah, and the film was very controversial at the time as well. It released with an X rating, which essentially means the movie is like treated as porn, which is weird considering it's an underage girl. But you know, putting aside the ethical qualms with the making of the movie, is the movie a good film? I don't believe so. I think it kind of sucks. I did enjoy the beginning, like probably 2/3 of the film, but by the end of the film, it just gets so stupid that it almost ruins the entire movie. The ending is just so dumb. And I think the ending is made significantly worse by the fact that Kubrick decided to have the film not in chronological order. The film actually starts with a scene that takes place, you know, at the very end chronologically, and it basically spoils the entire twist of the film. Yeah, I don't understand that decision at all. That wasn't present in the book. That's an original idea from Kubrick to do the events out of order. I believe the reason Kubrick did it was to kind of have a good hook at the beginning of the film, which it is effective at doing, but I feel like at the cost of completely spoiling the entire movie, it's just not worth it. The twist at the end is just so stupid. It's just revealed that Lolita has been, you know, cheating with this man, which again, we already know because of the scene at the beginning, but it's revealed that she's been cheating with this man and he's been disguising himself as various different characters throughout their trip. And I was just like, why does that matter? Why do I care about this? I didn't care at all. I was not invested enough in their relationship to care about her cheating. Also, the fact that he's like disguising himself as various different people, it's just so dumb. Like we already can recognize Peter Sellers is playing the characters. We already know that it's the same people. Like, it's not really a twist. I think the highlight of the film is basically everything else up until the ending. I really enjoyed the kind of dynamic between the main character and his wife before the wife kind of leaves the picture. You see how she's being kind of internally destroyed by the fact that her husband doesn't really love her and actually loves her daughter. Yeah, it's just a very dark film. It's pretty funny at times. There's a very funny scene where the mom asks the main character, like, if he believes in God, and she's like, if you didn't believe in God, I would kill myself. And pulls out a gun. I'm like, what the fuck? I don't know. I just found that very funny.
I wouldn't care if your maternal grandfather turned out to be a Turk. But if I ever found out that you didn't believe in God, I think I would commit suicide. I
think everything up until the mom leaving the picture is good, and I was entertained. But after that, I think the movie really falls off when it's just, you know, the main character and Lolita going on their sexcapades or whatever. Yeah, I was just not that interested. There is some good scenes where Lolita is getting upset at how possessive the main character is being over her and not letting her go out and basically just wanting her to himself. And there was some good performances there by Sue Leone, especially considering she's only 15 years old when this film was made. Other than that, I just didn't really enjoy the film very much. I think it's one of Kubrick's worst, and that's why I'm going to give it a low C tier. I would rank it as worse than Killer's Kiss even. Now moving on to the next film, a masterpiece in my opinion. We have Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Bit of a weird title. I don't really understand that title, but this film I thoroughly enjoyed, and I believe it is Kubrick's best film. This film is a political satire film critiquing the Cold War era politics, and especially the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. You know, the idea that, you know, Russia won't bomb us because if they kill 1 million of our civilians, then we'll kill 10 million of their civilians. And Kubrick thought a lot of these arguments around mutually assured destruction were just absurd. So this movie kind of takes mutually assured destruction to the logical extreme. Russia has a doomsday machine where if they're ever nuked, this machine will go off and will end all life on Earth. It can't be deactivated. It's a pretty over-the-top concept, but it really, is the logical conclusion of this mutually assured destruction ideology. The plot of the film centers around this general who has gone a bit insane. He really hates the commie menace and wants to finally drop the nukes on the Ruskies. And he's able, through some weird, kind of loophole in the chain of command, to order the nukes to be dropped on Russia. And this can't really be stopped. A lot of the film takes place in the war room of the Pentagon with the president desperately trying to stop these nukes from dropping. And the film is just very funny and very ingenious in terms of the kind of political satire. A few characters kind of stick out as highlights to me. Jack D. Ripper, who's the general that essentially goes rogue and orders the bombing, was very funny. He's essentially like going crazy. He's like a conspiracy nut. He thinks the commies are like using fluoride in the water to turn everybody crazy or something.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that?
And there's a general as well, played by Peter Sellers, who interacts with Ripper and kind of is trying to bring him back from the brink and call off these bombs. And he slowly starts to realize that Ripper is batshit insane. And it was very funny, their dynamic of him slowly kind of realizing that he is fucked. Another actor who sticks out to me is Slim Pickens, who is the actual person flying the fighter jet, the B-52 bomber that is going to drop the bombs. And their communications are cut off, so they don't realize that they're like about to bring about the end of the world. They're just like kind of feeling super patriotic, like they're about to save America, and it's just very funny, kind of the disconnect with them not realizing what is going on. And he kind of plays this, super patriotic, like Southern, wearing a cowboy hat type dude. It's just very funny. Also, the title character, Dr. Strangelove, also played by Peter Sellers. The film seems to reference Operation Paperclip, the operation in which the U.S. government kind of hired a lot of former Nazi scientists. Dr. Strangelove is a Nazi scientist who's working for the government as like an advisor, scientific advisor. And you see how he's kind of insidiously trying to turn America into Nazi Germany. There's a funny kind of monologue by Dr. Strangelove at the end where he's talking about how, even though this nuclear fallout is going to destroy like all life on Earth, we can actually build a good society in underground tunnels, and we can actually have 10 women to every man, and we can create this Aryan race. He's basically like building up some sort of like Nazi ethno-state in these underground bunkers. It was very funny to see. He also has this illness where he can't control his hand, and he'll suddenly go into a Nazi salute. It's very funny, very ingenious, clever writing, and the film is a cinematic masterpiece, and in my opinion, Stanley Kubrick's greatest film. It's just scathing in its satire. It's unapologetic. Kubrick takes a lot of these conservative beliefs that were popular at the time, a lot of this Red Scare, anti-communist nonsense, a lot of this, mutually assured destruction ideology, and he just destroys it, utterly destroys it with this film. And that is why, in my opinion, the film is a cinematic masterpiece and Kubrick's greatest film. This is also his most critically acclaimed film according to the website Metacritic. So I'm not the only one who loves this film. It's a very critically acclaimed film. And moving on to our next film, the film that is considered by many to be Kubrick's magnum opus, 2001: A Space Odyssey. This film I did thoroughly enjoy. I had never seen it before, and I was pretty blown away, especially by the visuals of this film, considering it's made in the 60s. It still looks pretty stunning and pretty real even today in a lot of these shots. It's like superior to Star Wars, in my opinion, the original Star Wars, in terms of visuals. You see, in the opening shot, the Earth like eclipsing the sun. Also the shots of the ship that they use, like model ships to create these shots, just blows your mind. I had a lot of fun watching this film and trying to figure out in my head how they did certain shots, knowing that there wasn't computer graphics back then, especially like the zero gravity shots where people are just walking up the walls and everything. It was just kind of blowing my mind how these people were walking on the walls. And it wasn't until I saw like the overhead shot of the character running on the wall that it clicked in my head, oh my god, the entire set is spinning. And that's how they were able to do these zero gravity shots, is literally the entire set is rotating. I also love Kubrick's use of classical music in here as well. I hadn't actually seen the full movie, but I have seen like the original scene with the monkeys and the music that goes boom, 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 boom. And I think I had always thought in my head that that song actually comes from Space Odyssey. I don't know if I realized that it was a classical song, but yeah, you can't listen to that song and not think of space. And I think that just speaks to Kubrick and how he was able to kind of pick the perfect music that fits with this film. Where I think the film kind of suffers a bit is the story. He kind of leaves things intentionally very open to interpretation, and this is a trend that would continue into some of his later films, such as The Shining, which we're going to get into. He very intentionally kind of leaves things cryptic and really doesn't give you the answers. And I have kind of mixed feelings on that. On one hand, it kind of makes the film a little bit confusing, especially the final scene. It is very confusing if you don't know what's going on. It almost at points seems like so open to interpretation that you can kind of just make up whatever. Like you can just make the movie whatever you want it to be, really. I also think Kubrick's decision to leave a lot of the things ambiguous in the film is kind of undercut by the fact that a book was released very shortly after the film, which was written by Arthur C. Clarke, who also wrote the screenplay, or helped write the screenplay with Kubrick of the movie, and they also worked closely together with the book. The book actually gives a lot more kind of clear-cut answers to a lot of these questions. And people will say, oh, you have to separate the book and the movie. Those are two distinctly different things. But a lot of the answers the book gives you, I think, perfectly map onto the movie. I haven't actually read the book, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but just from my Wikipedia research, it seems like the book gives some pretty definitive answers to certain things that are left ambiguous in the film that seem to be the correct answer. Like, they seem to map onto the film pretty well. For example, the monolith is one of the big mysteries of the film. What really is this monolith? Where did it come from? What is it doing? The book basically tells you exactly what it is, that it's a technology created by aliens that kind of aids humanity in evolution. And that's why the monkeys are able to kind of figure out how to use tools after they interact with the monolith. And that seems to perfectly map onto the movie. I mean, if you watch the movie with that interpretation, that seems totally correct. So that's where I would say that the book kind of undermines some of the ambiguity of the film. Also, the ending is very confusing. I didn't really like the ending when I saw it. Basically, he kind of finds the monolith, and then upon finding it, he's just suddenly transported into a simulation where he's living out his life, and he sees 4 different versions of himself that represent the 4 different stages of his life. And then he turns into a Superman baby. It's very strange, and if I didn't look up what that even means, I feel like I'd be very lost and confused. Based on researching it, it seems like what Kubrick intended for that scene is that the aliens have essentially put the main character into a simulation and kind of are treating him like a zoo animal, like they're observing him for his whole life. But I feel like there's no way to really figure that out if you're not told that. It's almost kind of so ambiguous that it's just really confusing. Not a big fan of the ending. There are some really cool visuals at the end. When he finally sees the monolith, they show all these lights flashing. It's kind of cool, but it goes on for literally 15 minutes. It's absurdly long how much he shows these lights beaming. And maybe that blew people's minds in the 60s, but by today's standards, I don't know if it's that cool that it needed to go on for 15 full minutes. Another thing I didn't really like as much with the movie is it's not really ever explained why HAL 9000, the AI, turns evil. That's another thing that's kind of left open to interpretation. I believe Kubrick actually spoke on why HAL had this breakdown, and he actually diverges from the path that the book takes. And he basically says that HAL turns evil because he's upset that he has discovered that he's fallible. Because HAL makes a mistake identifying a problem with one of the parts of the ship. But when I was watching the film, my interpretation was that HAL was intentionally getting this information wrong because he wanted to bait them to go outside and so he could kill them, which would imply that he was nefarious even before that. I don't know if I really like Kubrick's explanation because it doesn't really make sense why HAL would be fallible. All evidence pointed to HAL being infallible. I don't know, it just raises more questions than it answers, honestly. But anyway, 2001: A Space Odyssey is a goddamn masterpiece, even with all the the issues with it. It's a goddamn cinematic masterpiece, and it's going in the S tier. Better than Paths to Glory. Another fun fact about 2001 is that the current version that is widely available is actually not the version that was originally released in theaters. It was actually originally released in like a limited amount of theaters, and it was 160 minutes long, which is like 20 minutes longer than the current cut of the film. It was another instance where Kubrick like shaved the movie down, and apparently Warner Bros. Has this cut, and they've just never released the footage. Warner Bros., please release the 20-minute longer cut of Space Odyssey, please. And yeah, moving on to our next film here, a film that I think is Kubrick's most underrated film, A Clockwork Orange. Now, you know this film is a masterpiece just based on the poster alone. I mean, just look at that poster. Clockwork Orange being the adventures of a young man whose principal interests are rape, ultraviolence, and Beethoven. Imagine you're a kid in the 70s. You see that poster at your local cinema. I mean, that's just legendary. They don't make posters like that anymore. The film is a masterpiece. The film follows the adventures of Alex, the main character, who is a criminal. It's just in his nature to be a criminal degenerate. He loves raping. He engages in what he calls ultraviolence, which is just like beating the shit out of and raping women. He's just violent by nature, and he's sent to prison. The film explores the theme of rehabilitation of prisoners, and the film kind of asks the question, at what cost can we rehabilitate someone? The main character goes through this kind of torturous rehabilitation procedure where they inject him with some fluids that make him feel sick, and then his eyes are forced open to watch nonstop, violence and horrific imagery, so that he basically associates the violence with negative feelings, and it makes him essentially not able to commit violence or crime anymore. And this procedure essentially takes away his free will. He can't really commit violence even if he wanted to. He doesn't even have the choice. And the film kind of asks the question of whether that is justified to take away someone's free will in an attempt to rehabilitate them and reintegrate them into society. There's a priest in the film, a religious character, and he is disgusted with this idea, and he thinks that you're not really turning the person into a good person if they don't even have the choice to commit sin or to do anything wrong. The character also becomes pretty brainwashed, not just against violence, but he essentially becomes a bootlicker to the state. He's a literal bootlicker in one of the more disturbing scenes of the film.
Well, I want you to lick it. Go on! Lick it!
And oh my brothers, would you believe your faithful friend and long-suffering narrator pushed out his red Yazzik 1.5 miles to lick the Grasny-Vonny boots?
So that kind of makes you think even further of if we had some type of, kind of brainwashing technology that could rehabilitate people, could this be used for nefarious purposes to essentially make people agents of the state and basically, bootlicker cucks? I feel like the film raised a lot of very interesting questions that really made me think. It's a very funny film as well, just the outfits they wear. The main character and his criminal gang all wear like jock straps like outside of their clothing for some reason, and the main character also has like eyeballs on his suit as cufflinks. I don't know if those are meant to be like actual eyeballs, but very odd clothing and the way people speak as well. That is one aspect that I think makes this film kind of hard to watch. The author of the book, and it's used in the adaptation in the movie as well, he made up like a bunch of words that don't exist for this language called Nadset in the book that the characters speak. Like the characters were speaking, and the whole time I was watching, I was like, are these characters speaking in like UK slang that I'm not familiar with? Or are they just making up words like Shakespeare? And the answer is the latter. They just have this whole made-up language. You can kind of figure out what they're saying based on the context clues, but it does make the film a little bit kind of hard to watch at points, and I could see it turning people off from the film. But other than that, yeah, I thought it was a pretty good film. One of the themes of the film as well that I don't think is very well executed in the movie is the film attempts to kind of show how, people on the right wing and the left wing both kind of use the main character as a political pawn, kind of trying to push the idea that both sides kind of use people to push their narrative, use these people in prison to kind of push their agenda. And I understand the point it was trying to make, but I feel like the film doesn't really make that point very well. You definitely see the negative aspects of the kind of authoritarian leaning party, which is the one that puts the main character into this machine that rehabilitates him and essentially turns him into a bootlicker. You see how they're kind of, abusing and using him. But later in the film, after the main character, Alex, discovers that his friends have become, corrupt cops and they beat the shit out of him and try to kill him, he's saved by Mr. Alexander, who is a character we've seen earlier in the film. And Mr. Alexander is kind of the left-wing person who is against the authoritarian regime. The message that the movie kind of tries to push is that this Mr. Alexander character on the left is actually just as bad as the authoritarian fascists, because he also treats Alex very poorly and doesn't really care about Alex. But I don't really think it works, because the reason Mr. Alexander treats Alex so poorly isn't really because of his political beliefs or anything. It's just because Alex, at the beginning of the movie, raped his wife and then crippled him. It's more just a matter of a personal beef than, Mr. Alexander's politics being corrupt or something. So that's one aspect where I don't think the movie really made the point it was trying to make. But other than that, I would say the movie just is a banger. It fires on all cylinders. It's very funny as well. It's also very kind of pornographic at times. It's probably one of Kubrick's most pornographic films, other than Eyes Wide Shut, which is his final film. Also very violent and very funny. The main character is very just kind of nonchalant, even though he does a lot of very kind of fucked up shit. He just always keeps his cool and is very nonchalant. Yeah, I think the movie is a masterpiece, and I would say it's my second favorite Kubrick film after Dr. Strangelove, which I think is a hot take. Most people rank Clockwork Orange as not one of Kubrick's best, but I think it is top tier Kubrick film. It's going up in the S rank tier. And moving on to our next Kubrick film, we have Barry Lyndon. This is another historical epic by Kubrick, although this one is fictional. It's not a real character. And I was actually kind of upset to learn that Kubrick was actually intending his next film after Clockwork Orange to be a Napoleon film. It was going to be like a historical epic about Napoleon, but because the studio didn't believe that would be successful, they didn't give that funding, and he had to make this Barry Lyndon film. I would have loved to see Kubrick's take on Napoleon, but he was able to use his knowledge of studying the time period of Napoleon to make this Barry Lyndon movie. I think Barry Lyndon is a good film. This film, I really enjoyed it while watching it, but I do feel like it doesn't stick in my mind as much as his other films. The film reminded me kind of like a Scorsese film, like Wolf of Wall Street or something like that, where the main character is kind of like a very flawed person, and they kind of engage in a lot of fucked up behavior, and then you finally see them reckon with what they've done at the end of the film, and they kind of have a downfall. You see Barry Lyndon's treatment of his stepson is really kind of fucked up, and it really messes up his stepson, and that's kind of his downfall. The film presents a very flawed, fucked up character, but you do kind of weirdly empathize with him, even though he is kind of a piece of shit. Another aspect of the film that is why a lot of people now consider it to be a masterpiece is the visuals. He kind of tried to recreate the look of paintings in the era to actually capture the lighting of how things looked at the time with just candle light and things like that, and not using artificial light, which at the time with the camera technology they had, capturing things by candlelight was pretty difficult. Reading about the making of the film really makes you kind of appreciate what Kubrick did. You can really see Kubrick's kind of attention to detail in making every shot have to look, just like the era. And the movie does kind of capture that old-timey look. Overall, I'd say this film is kind of middle of the pack. It is enjoyable, but I think it goes on a little bit too long. So I'm going to give Barry Lyndon a B tier. That might be a little low for some people, but that's where we're going to put it. And I would actually rank it below The Killing. Now moving on to our next film, and here's where I'm probably going to have some more controversial takes, is The Shining. I am not a big fan of The Shining. This is Stanley Kubrick's first foray into the horror genre, and it is now regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time. It's like a classic. In my opinion, the film drags on for way too long. That is an opinion that was common at the time when it came out. There's an entire storyline with this black cook character who is the one who explains what The Shining is. And there's a whole storyline of him coming back to the hotel to save the kid and then he just ends up dying. His whole storyline essentially serves no purpose other than to get one of these snow cats to the hotel, which is how the wife and kid are able to escape. But I mean, it doesn't really serve any purpose. There was already a snow cat at the hotel. They could have just had them escape on that snow cat. Jack does disable that snow cat so they can't leave, but they could have just changed things around, in my opinion, and it would have been a better film. Kubrick seemingly acknowledges this because there is a shorter cut of The Shining that does cut this entire storyline out. American fans may not know that there's a European cut of The Shining that is actually like half an hour shorter than the cut that we see in America and the cut that's commonly available. I haven't seen that cut myself yet. Maybe that does genuinely fix a lot of the problems with the film. Maybe I'll buy it on DVD or something because it's not very widely available. It's unclear whether Kubrick made the shorter cut of The Shining because he genuinely thought it was a better film cut that way, or if he just made the cuts because he felt pressured because a lot of people were saying that the movie was too long at the time. I think probably the latter is more close to the truth. The other thing I don't really like too much about the film, and I kind of mentioned this earlier when I was talking about 2001, is again Kubrick kind of leaving things open to interpretation. I would say this film almost goes like way open to interpretation, where you can essentially just read into this movie whatever you want. Like, people have said this movie is about like the genocide of the Native Americans in America. People have said this movie is about the Holocaust. Like, these are actual things that scholars have said and wrote books on, and I don't really think any of them are true. The Native American aspect, there is some evidence that that was intended in the film. There's like several pieces of art by Native American artists, and of course it's mentioned that the hotel is built on a Native American burial ground. That made me laugh when I heard that in the film. It's kind of a throwaway line. They just mentioned that the hotel was built on an Indian burial ground, and it's just kind of funny seeing how that's like a super common trope nowadays in ghost movies. But obviously back when this movie came out, that wasn't really a trope. But that does seem like kind of a silly explanation to why all the paranormal stuff is happening, just that it was on an Indian burial ground. I don't know, that just sounds very stupid to me, especially considering like there's not really much else in the movie like hinting at that there's like Indian spirits in the hotel. That just seems kind of randomly thrown in there. But anyway, yeah, I don't know that the movie really is about the Native American genocide or the Holocaust. I don't think the movie's really about any of those things. I think people are just reading things into the movie because it's so open to interpretation. You can just kind of make up whatever you want. Especially the ending is like, just doesn't make sense at all, and there is really no explanation that makes sense to me. Like, it's just dumb. The painting, there's basically a painting that implies that like Jack Nicholson's character is like reincarnated or something from a previous owner of the hotel or something. I don't even know what the ending implies, and I don't think really anyone else knows. They just kind of pretend they do. Also, the paranormal aspect, that is something I did kind of enjoy of the film, is it is left ambiguous as to whether these ghosts we're seeing and these spirits are actually even real. It's kind of hinted at that maybe the characters are just going crazy and these things they're seeing aren't actually real, but he kind of ruins it by having a ghost release Jack Nicholson's character from a pantry when he gets locked in a pantry later in the film, which basically confirms that the ghosts are real. So that's one aspect of the film where I kind of would have rather them actually left that up to interpretation, and they don't. Whereas almost everything else in the movie is super open to interpretation. As far as the characters and the acting in the film, that is, I think, the greatest part. Specifically the wife's performance, especially her like facial expressions of being super scared. Something about the way her face looks and the way she can express herself like really communicates that she's horrified, and it makes the movie a lot more scary than it would have been, because you kind of are empathizing with her and you're feeling scared along with her. It blew my mind that there's actually people that think her performance is bad. She was actually nominated for a Razzie for the worst performance of the year, and I believe this film was also nominated for worst film of the year at the Razzies. Some people online have theorized that people thought the performance was bad because it was so different from the book. But I mean, even still, it's just crazy people thought that performance was bad. I thought, if anything, Jack Nicholson's performance goes a little over the top at points. I think the highlight for me of the movie is the scene where Jack Nicholson is finally confronted and he realizes that he hasn't even been writing anything this whole time. And that's when it really sinks in of like, oh, he has truly gone insane. And that part actually was kind of scary in the film. There's also a scene at the end when the wife is like trying to escape the hotel, where she just like enters a bunch of different rooms, and we see all this shit that is like makes no sense. Like she opens the door and there's all these skeletons, and then she sees like a dude in a bear costume giving someone head. I know that's a reference to the book, but there's just so many like random shit thrown in right at the end where I'm like, what in the fuck are we watching right now? Yeah, I feel like the movie just really falls off towards the end. It's very goofy. But yeah, that's my thoughts on The Shining. I think it's Kubrick's most overrated film. I would not rank it among the best horror films of all time. At the time, it actually had a pretty mixed reception. A lot of people thought it was a pretty, bad film, way too long and confusing. And I find myself actually agreeing more with the critics at the time than with the critics now. Because many of the critics who shit on it at the time have now walked it back and said, I was wrong, this is actually a masterpiece. And those critics, I think, just cucked out. Like, they're just hopping on the bandwagon. They're hopping on the Shining bandwagon when really they were right before. They should have just stuck with their guns. Another fun fact about The Shining that makes it kind of similar to 2001, like I talked about, is there actually is a cut scene at the very end where the characters are in a hospital and it's revealed that Jack Nicholson's body was never found, implying that maybe he became some type of ghost or something. But Kubrick cut that scene out for the wider theatrical release, and the scene has never been seen again. So release that cut as well. Release the original Shining cut and the original 2001 cut, please, Warner Brothers. So I'll rank The Shining in C tier, better than Killer's Kiss. So now moving on to Kubrick's next film, his final war film, and his final film that was released while he was alive, we have Full Metal Jacket. This is an all-time classic. The film is split pretty distinctly into two different halves. The first half deals with a drill sergeant who is very hard on these new recruits and kind of building them up into these killing machines for the military. And the second half deals with soldiers actually out in Vietnam. And the consensus among critics seems to be that the first half is superior to the second half, which, I would agree, but I do think the second half is also very good. Although the second half, it's kind of less clear what the point is. It kind of ends abruptly, and it kind of leaves you to sit and think, what really was the film trying to say. This film is a bit different from his previous war films in that it doesn't really have as strongly of an anti-war message. The film is very realistic and kind of does highlight, a lot of the ugly parts of war and of the recruit training. It's not really explicitly saying, these things are all bad necessarily. Kubrick has stated that the film is not necessarily an anti or pro-war film. He's just trying to present things, as they are, as realistic as possible. I kind of have mixed feelings on this. Part of me thinks that, there should be a point to the film. It should have some sort of, message it's trying to convey, or else what's the point of even making a movie? But then there's also part of me that thinks, there is value in just presenting things as is, as they are, and letting the audience kind of come to their own conclusion of what they think. I do think the film justifies its existence, and it is a very enjoyable film. The first half, like I said, shows the military training with the drill sergeant, and he's, very brutal with the recruits. You see how the training is very negatively impacting one specific recruit and kind of causes him to lose it at the end. And it was very entertaining, and I was invested in all the characters. The drill sergeant is fucking hilarious. he makes up such absurd insults. They actually cast a real drill sergeant, and he's actually ad-libbing stuff that's not in the script. They cast, the perfect guy to do this role. The first half is great. The second half also very funny. Although it's not kind of explicitly an anti-war film, it does highlight a lot of the dehumanization of the gooks, as they call them in the film. The Vietnamese people that they're killing. They don't even really view them as humans.
I'm so fucking good! That ain't no shit neither! I've done got me 157 dead gooks killed! And 51 of buffaloes too! Them are all certified! Any women or children? Sometimes! How can you shoot women and children? Easy! You just don't lead them so much! Ain't war hell?
It is kind of a a fucked up, ugly thing to see, but, you know, them being in the military, being trained to kill these people, obviously they're going to have that type of mentality to some degree, dehumanizing the enemy. It's a very funny film, like the camaraderie between all the characters. They have a very fucked up sense of humor. And yeah, I love the film. I think it's great. I'll put it in A tier, and it's borderline S, but I don't think it quite reaches the heights of the Paths of Glory. I'll put it in the highest A, borderline S. So now we get to Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut. This was, of course, released after Kubrick died, so there is some question of, you know, how much this film really is Kubrick's and how much was, you know, changed after he died. They claim that Kubrick had a final cut that he showed some of the actors and his family days before he died. So apparently the cut that was released was his final cut with some censorship added that I'll get into. But, you know, there is some conspiracies that maybe that's not true. Maybe there's a longer cut, a different cut of the movie out there.
The movie was recut and changed after his death. And they will deny it. But as a student of Kubrick, I'm watching the movie and I'm like, well, Kubrick wouldn't do that. Kubrick wouldn't do that either. Kubrick would have trimmed this scene.
I didn't know they recut it after his death.
Okay, so apparently
I think they finished it.
Well, that's the party line.
That's their version.
That's the party line. But I think that they changed the notes, the close-ups, the inserts of the notes. I think those are changed. It's missing a narration.
Also, Kubrick was, you know, notorious for changing and editing his movies right up until the last minute. So he may not have wanted this version to be released, even if he did call it the final cut. Part of me kind of wants to believe in these theories that this isn't really Kubrick's film, because this film sucks in my opinion. It's just very odd and very strange, and I don't really get the point of it. The film follows, you know, Tom Cruise, who is this doctor character, and his wife Nicole Kidman, and they're kind of struggling with jealousy in their relationship, because early in the film they go to a party and they're kind of flirting with, you know, other people. Nicole Kidman for some reason reveals that she was strongly considering cheating on him, and basically says, like, if the opportunity arises, she would have cheated on him. The dialogue is very strange. Nicole Kidman is, like, very weirdly open about things and, like, seems to not understand that, like, what she's saying is horrible and is gonna, like, severely negatively impact Tom Cruise's mind. I think maybe the intention is she's, like, kind of a jealous character and she's intentionally trying to say things to, you know, hurt Tom Cruise and make him jealous. But I don't know, some of the dialogue was just so strange in this movie. There's a scene where she wakes up and is, like, explaining to Tom Cruise, oh my God, I had this dream where I was just getting fucked by so many men that weren't you, and you were in the corner, and I was just laughing at you while I was taking so many cocks. And I'm just like, what am I watching right now? Like,
I was fucking other men. So many. I don't know how many I was with. And I knew you could see me in the arms of all these men, just fucking all these men. And I wanted to make fun of you. To laugh in your face.
It's like porn tier dialogue. I'm like, what am I watching? Anyway, the film follows Tom Cruise as he goes to this weird, like, occult orgy. And they have some weird, creepy rituals that they do. The film kind of follows him, like, trying to investigate further into this. There's a point where Tom Cruise is kind of worried that they may have killed somebody as a result of this orgy. And then the ending of the movie is just so dumb. Like, Tom Cruise is confronted by one of these members of the cult who is his friend that he didn't know was, you know, in this sex cult. He basically tries to tell him that they didn't kill anybody. She just happened to die because she's a dope fiend or whatever. Then it's never really figured out whether that's true or not. We're just kind of supposed to guess as the audience, I guess. And I'm just left wondering, like, what was the point? Like, why do I care about this sex cult and who runs it? Why do I care whether they killed somebody or not? Like, I couldn't care less about anything in this film. And yeah, I didn't even really care about Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's relationship either. I'm like, they just seem like insufferable people. The ending dialogue, it ends with, we need to just fuck. It's so cringe. It's like literally a porn tier writing movie. Like it's horrible. I don't understand why people like this movie. Maybe I just don't get it, and I'm gonna give it a D tier. Not as bad as Fear and Desire, I guess. Also, they censored the film when he's at this orgy. There's scenes where it was very clear that they kind of filmed people having sex, but they edited in people to be like positioned so that you can't really see what's happening. It looks like when you're watching like cartoons as a kid and a character is naked and there always just so happens to be an object like right in front of the character's genitals so that they don't have to animate the nudity. It's just fucking retarded. Apparently the DVD version actually has the uncensored sex. Yeah, the version I watched was censored and it just looked like garbage. So yeah, I'm just gonna pretend that this is not canon, not a Kubrick film. That is gonna wrap it up, our tier list. My conclusion based on watching Kubrick's film is that he's a masterful filmmaker, and it's pretty impressive how he's able to tackle such different genres and be so effective. He has one of the most critically acclaimed sci-fi films, one of the most critically acclaimed political satire films, some of the most critically acclaimed war films, horror movies. Like, the dude really just can do anything, and it's a shame we lost him so early. But yep, that's gonna do it for the tier list, and yeah.